In this video, we're going to look at a close reading lesson. This is a 7th grade example. The goal here, as with all of the virtual work that we're doing, is to get as close as possible to what we'd be able to do if we were in person. So this is a close reading lesson, so we want to keep the text front and center. We want to start with kids doing a thinking job about the text, being clear what that thinking job is. And then we want to make sure that we're having a conversation about the text. However, I also want to be able to see student thinking, and that has often been a challenge for close reading lessons in the virtual space. So I used Classkick, and this is a teacher view, and we'll come back to this in a minute in more detail, but I can see all students' work. There are only 3 students in this class here. I can see how far students have progressed in the text. This student, Paul, here has gone through to the 6th page, but I can also see where any of the students who are live and logged in are at that moment. So you can see the black box. Jeremiah is on the very first page here, and I'll know where everybody is. So if we are supposed to be looking at a certain page of the text, I can take a quick scan and know that everybody is in fact on that page and looking at that page at that moment. So the lesson itself, this first slide is basically front loading background knowledge. This is kind of optional, but if it's helpful to front load some background knowledge, you can do this on the first slide. So it just has some key information about vocabulary that students are going to need to be successful. This is a piece of they're reading an excerpt from this text, and then it has a link to a video. So this is just an optional way to front load some content knowledge. The rest of the lesson, or the rest of the Classkick slides, are just the text itself. So a couple paragraphs per slide as they walk through. And this is, by putting it on a Classkick, kids can annotate. So they've got the option to annotate with a text tool like this student has done here, or a draw tool as they've done here. They have the option to voice record or add a text box, and I can put in some directions so that they can stop here and talk about the main idea to this point, or in this case, about the main characters and what we've learned about them based on their dialogue. So I can get some data that way from more students than if I'm just calling on individual kids to answer. And really, it's just the text, but I can ask kids to annotate and jot anywhere and be able to see that work. So that's what the rest of it's going to look like, is just the text. We go back to the first slide, and the first page of the text. We can see that it does have this thinking job fill in. The student filled in fiction. They got a check. They know that they're correct. They have this space to jot down the gist or the main idea of the part that they've read so far. And then for me, in the teacher view, I can see these little flags pop up that tell me that they have correctly identified the genre. So if kids are getting started, I want to know immediately if there are kids who are misidentifying the genre so that I can address that right away. I'm going to have these flags pop up. So it's a simple access question. The other thing that we'll see here is that students can raise a hand for help, and I can jump in to help them by just clicking there. And when I do that, I can have a chat back and forth conversation with them. So there's a lot of opportunity to do some individual feedback and conversation in addition to what most of my close reading lesson will be, which is the whole group conversation. But I now have some ways to actually check in on the annotations and the thought process of all my kids, not just the ones who are talking each time that I call on individual students. So it keeps the text front and center. It's simple because they're just clicking through the text. There's not much more added to it. They can always click through the text to find evidence without having to wait for me to move slides back and forth or move a screen up and down. And they can jot things on their own text that I can see instead of having to just verbally tell me things that I then have to jot on their text. In the Zoom itself, we can always have a second device signed in. So this is my second device here, which means if I want to pull a small group or a student into a breakout room, I can do that. I can turn my camera on the second device, which is just my phone, and I can still be in the main room, see the main room. They see me while I'm talking to a couple kids. Not something you're likely to use a lot in a close reading lesson, but just a good strategy to have a second device in your Zoom lesson, and to use ClassKick to have kids be able to work through their own text while you are discussing that text in a close reading lesson.